Another year over, another one of Framedropped's signature Game of the Year lists. Although a lot of stuff has been pushed to next year, 2022 has definitely been a big year for fantastic games. As always, the following list is a personal one, so you might not agree with every single thing, but I'm happy to fight you in the comments. Also, I have obviously only included games that I have actually played. So let's not waste any time and dive into my personal top 10 games of 2022. Welcome to Framedropped. I imagine making a sequel to a well-received game to be one of the hardest tasks there is in the game industry. I mean, how much should be new and surprise people? How much should be old and hit people right in their nostalgia nuts? And how can you fulfill people's expectations when everyone expects it to be better than the first game? Well, number 10 on our list is a game that did even more than that: Horizon Forbidden West. 5 years after the release of Horizon Zero Dawn, the Dutch developer Guerrilla Games finally continued Aloy's quest for survival in an open, post-apocalyptic, futuristic and ancient at the same time, robot-ridden world. To be frank, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Horizon formula in the first game, and I am still not 100% sold on it now, but every single aspect of the first game has been improved and expanded in Forbidden West. Character interactions no longer feel stiff and lifeless, the open world is much more interesting, and although there is an incredible amount that you can do, the game doesn't force you to do anything and investigate every question mark if you don't want to, which honestly feels so much better. There is much more enemy variety and weapon variety as well, with lots of customization options to suit almost any player style. And we didn't even talk about the elephant in the room yet. This game simply looks incredible. It was definitely built as a showpiece for the PlayStation 5 and arguably is one of the best looking games on the platform so far. And keep in mind that Horizon is a huge ass open world game. Diving underwater for the first time especially made my jaw drop. Everything from the graphics to the music is top notch. And by the way, Forbidden West even ticks the box of open world games that have minigames that are so good that they could be their own game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you haven't played Machine Strike yet. This time around I was also quite invested in the story, especially around the end where it turned into directions that I definitely didn't expect. But I won't spoil anything, you'll have to play it for yourself. Horizon only making it to number 10 doesn't mean that I didn't like the game though, it just means that there are 9 more games that I enjoyed even more this year. 9. Alright, the next entry is a remake of a JRPG that came out in 1994 for the SNES and not that many people got to play. I am talking about Live Alive. Live Alive? Well, in the game in question, you take control of 8 different protagonists that all have their own chapters with a different time period, spanning from prehistory through Imperial China and the Wild West, all the way to the distant future. All of these chapters are bite-sized adventures that each just take a few hours to complete and at first do not seem connected in any way, as it doesn't matter in which order you tackle those chapters and you always start with a new character. But I'm not going to spoil what happens in the end. This remake of Live Alive that came out this year stays true to the original in most ways, but incorporates Square Enix's patented HD 2D art style that honestly works quite in favor of this game. I can't say that much about the gameplay because, in all honesty, it is a pretty simplistic turn-based battle system as we all know it, and it isn't particularly difficult either. In fact, Live Alive is pretty easy, but I enjoyed that because I was much more interested in experiencing all different time periods and the story and its characters than having to grind and battle all the time. Some characters do have special abilities though, such as being able to turn invisible or to read other people's thoughts, but those also rather serve the story. But again, for me, that's a good thing. All in all, I was positively surprised by a solid JRPG that isn't too long or too difficult, but rather a chill experience that I was able to enjoy in small bites and that genuinely wanted me to see all chapters and where it all leads. I say maybe give it a chance if that sounds good, and you might just fall in love with Live Alive. 8. Out of all the games that I was looking forward to this year, I definitely didn't think that I would be playing a game about a space cartel using humans as drugs, featuring talking guns by the Rick and Morty co-creator Justin Roiland, but here I am. High on Life is a first-person shooter, but the main gameplay loop consists of traveling to other planets in order to fulfill bounty contracts, collect new weapons and abilities, and upgrade those abilities with pesos that you earn from your missions. But let's be honest here, if you play High on Life, you probably don't play it for its state-of-the-art gameplay, but for Justin Roiland's humor. You either love it or you are a very weird person. There were honestly moments when I had tears in my eyes because a joke just hit me off guard. Everything in this game doesn't take itself too serious, including the tutorial.
Hey, you can run, you know. I don't know if you knew that. Try hitting the button on your screen. I can't say the name of the button because I have no fucking clue what kind of controller or keyboard you're using.
Everything talks in this game. Your suit, your friends and enemies, your weapons, out of which my favorite would be Knifey.
Fuck yes, thank you! Pleased to meet you, I'm Knifey. Now use me! Let me fucking stuff this cocksucking in! Oh fuck yes, finally! You have no idea how long I've been thinking about this! More, I need more stabbing!
And there is a lot of dialogue. You can tune it down in the menu if you don't like that, but I didn't even think about wanting to have less chatter. In a fashion that is fairly similar to, let's say, Rick and Morty, the dialogue often feels improvised. Maybe because it probably is, but that often leads to moments that you just probably won't expect.
God damn, you filled out those papers like a son of a bitch! Like a real bitch you are! Fuck you! You're promoted! You're free to go into Krubus's office! Why? Because fuck you, that's why I don't need a fucking reason. I'm McBossington, and I'll be in here jerking off or whatever. Fucking other stuff too. I don't give a shit.
But even though I brushed off the gameplay aspect at the beginning, it isn't bad at all, believe me. The various weapons are interesting, I always had fun exploring, and with a couple of secondary abilities that each weapon can fire out of its trick hole, yes, traversal can be quite fun. And even here you never know what you can expect. For example, you might want to take out a crime organization and find yourself having to fill out paperwork. High on Life is a weird mix of good gameplay, hilarious writing, very interesting character and world design, and for some reason entire licensed live-action movies. This game hit me right up my trick hole, and if you are a fan of Justin Roiland's humor and storytelling, what are you waiting for? Play this game.
Well, look what we got here.
Whoa, what are you doing? Come on, he's just a kid. Don't shoot him.
Oh, you don't want to shoot me just because your gun said not to, just because you're your little gun. Oh, but you look.
I am not shooting a kid.
Go ahead, do it. Shoot me. You shot me, I'm dead.
All right, there. Are you happy now?
7. Activision killing off the developer behind Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 remake, and therefore destroying any chance of us getting a new Tony Hawk game anytime soon, left a void in my heart that nothing is really able to entirely fill. But this year's Ollie Ollie World managed to fill it just a little bit. Don't get me wrong, this game looks nothing like a Tony Hawk game, and it honestly isn't anything like it either, apart from featuring skateboards. But it is pretty similar in one aspect. Mastering the gameplay and burning it into your muscle memory feels like one of the best things in the world. Ollie Ollie World, as its two prequels, is a 2.5D mix between a side-scrolling platformer and a skateboarding game, with a captivating art style and a soundtrack that is so chill that it doesn't only represent a perfect mood, but I'll also gladly listen to in real life as well. This time, there is even a small little story with honestly good writing that made me laugh way too many times. Somehow Roll7, the developers behind this game, have mastered the perfect gameplay loop. While selecting levels from a top-down map, you learn the basics, not with classic tutorials, but as part of the main game itself, and it therefore never feels boring. With new levels and new areas, the game becomes more challenging, but it is never so challenging as not making you want to continue anymore. In fact, the game stays quite easy if you want it to be. It is usually not that difficult if you just want to reach the end of a level, but there is a lot of incentive to get better at the game and to try again and again. For example, through breaking high scores and fulfilling optional tasks in each level, you'll gain new customization options for your character and even secret levels that you wouldn't get to see otherwise. Even during a level, you can often choose to skate down a more difficult path if you want to see everything, but you don't have to if you just want to experience the game. But chances are, as soon as you get better, you will want to revisit older levels and retry as often as it takes to beat all high scores. There's something about Ollie Ollie that the Trials games also have. Retrying a section is instant, and you'll always want to try just one more time in order to reach the end without bailing, or in order to collect everything. Honestly, if I wouldn't get blisters on my hands, I would play this game day and night. 6. When there's a lot of hype surrounding a game release, often people will get disappointed if their high expectations can't be met. And I think that's probably what happened with the Callisto Protocol, because reviews are all over the place and people either seem to be let down or absolutely love the game. And you probably guessed it, I'm in the latter team. Maybe because I didn't have any expectations at all. The game was directed by the co-creator of Dead Space and is obviously a spiritual successor, but I never played a lot of Dead Space, so there's no nostalgia for me here, and I'm not even the biggest fan of horror games in general. This game simply released, I checked it out and fell in love with it. The Callisto Protocol takes place in the somewhat near future of the year 2320 on a prison system on Jupiter's moon Callisto, on which you, Jacob Lee, are innocently held prisoner. Of course, things go wrong pretty quickly and many inmates are infected with an unknown virus, which mutates them in sometimes pretty wild ways. And now it is your task to find out just what the fuck is going on. It is not often that a game instantly hooks me this much, but it is honestly no surprise. I just love the near future space setting, which is futuristic but not too unbelievable, with for example weapons coming out of a 3D printer. Apart from looking great, on the PS5 they implemented the DualSense controller in an awesome way. You have no idea what you're missing. I should mention that the PS5 version is probably the way to go anyway, because at least at launch, all other versions of the game, including the PC versions, used to have major performance issues. But alright, what kinda surprised me though is that the Callisto Protocol is not an easy game. There were various instances where I died multiple times in the same spot, but it never felt unfair. I always just had to step back a little and evaluate my strategy in order to persevere. But even though I already mentioned so many good things about this game, the best thing by far about it for me is its length, with approximately 10 to 12 hours to finish the story. If you're not that old yet, you will know what I'm talking about in a few years. 5. When Obsidian, the developer behind games like Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds, announced the next game, probably absolutely no one expected that game to be Pentiment, a 2D narrative role-playing game set in the 16th century in Bavaria. But here we are and I'm so fucking glad about that. Pentiment is like nothing I've ever played before really. Starting in the year 1518, you are Andreas Mahler, an artist who traveled the world a little and now earns his coin by making manuscripts. Although there are exciting things such as murder mysteries and intrigues to uncover, Pentiment is a slow game, and I absolutely love that. The game doesn't overwhelm you with things that you can and need to do and is therefore very chill. An essential part of Pentiment is getting to know all the different characters, and the brilliant thing is, although none of them are voiced, they are so well written that you want to get to know every single detail about them. Also, the text appears in various beautiful calligraphy styles. Nobles have a different style than common folk, for example. But that is apparently dependent on Andreas's perception of the other person, which means that the type of calligraphy even changes after Andreas, for example, learns something that changes his view of a character. You can also decide on a couple of things about your own backstory, such as where you've traveled to, what you studied, and so on, and all of that will also influence what you can say and how people will perceive you. Another thing that I really love about this game is its sound design. Pentiment features little to no music at all, and the entire atmosphere consists of ambient noise and the pen scribbling, to which I could listen to for hours. The experience of how it feels to play Pentiment is really difficult to get across by putting it into words. You really have to experience it for yourself. But if you do, I am pretty sure that you won't regret it. 4. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I just see a trailer and know that I like the game. This has exactly happened with a little title by Supermassive Games, simply called The Quarry. As a spiritual successor to 2015's Until Dawn, The Quarry is an interactive drama horror video game, at least that's what Wikipedia says. Alright, so what that means is that you must control 9 different teenagers whose goal is to survive their last night at the Hackett's Quarry summer camp, while also trying to find out why pretty wild stuff keeps happening. This is one of those games that plays more like a film than a traditional game. Your decisions significantly alter the plot and its ending, and characters can forever die if you screw up. I for myself am a sucker for those kinds of games, such as Everything by David Cage. I honestly don't want to tell you too much about the plot or show too much, because a big part of The Quarry is the fear of the unknown in the first half of the game, and they did a hell of a job with that. The atmosphere is astounding with choices in cinematography and sound editing. I also don't think that I have ever seen such a phenomenal implementation of lighting in any video game to date, and that says something. There's good music, the performances are great, the facial expressions look good, though sometimes a little uncanny valley maybe. All in all, The Quarry just feels like an awesome teen horror film that you can control. Gameplay-wise, the tutorials are presented in a fun way. It is pretty intuitive to select what the character is going to say, as opposed to many other games where you sometimes select an option and the character says an entirely different thing of what you actually wanted him to say. But despite that, the outcome of decisions is not really predictable, so there's not really always a definite right or wrong thing to do, which I really appreciate. And sometimes you are even able to interrupt other characters, although it might not always be a viable thing to do. Also, the entire game is presented with letterboxes, which in film school was the topic that I chose for my bachelor's degree. Nobody cares? Okay. 3. For this next entry, I actually debated with myself if it even makes sense to put it on the list. You see, remakes have become kind of a risky topic in recent times. A remaster? Sure, it's the same game, but a little bit prettier. A remake, on the other hand, usually means that everything has been rebuilt from the ground up. And most times that still holds true. But what if the game is so new that nobody actually asked for a remake? Well, that's what happened with The Last of Us Part 1. The original game released late in the PS3 life cycle, which was a while ago but not that long ago, right? And then Naughty Dog even released a remaster of that game for the PS4, which very much still holds up today. So as the internet usually is, especially when it comes to The Last of Us, people were furious when Naughty Dog announced another version of their beloved game. This time for the PS5 and for a hefty full price. But Last of Us is my favorite game of all time, and thanks to my significant other, I got to experience it once again. And honestly, I'm just so happy that I did. For me, this game is absolutely perfect. Period. In my opinion, Naughty Dog managed to achieve the impossible and improve the game in every way, including some tweaks for the AI in addition to just some pretty graphics, while still not changing anything about the game that would make it a different feeling experience, if that makes any sense. Everything has been rebuilt and looks absolutely stunning. It might just be the best looking PS5 game to date, which is a little weird because Part 1 now looks even better than Part 2. The new lighting system is especially jaw-dropping, and most characters have been reworked a little to more closely match the vision and the actors themselves. There's a lot more nuance to facial expressions, which makes it easier to read the exact performance from the original actors. In addition, there's an optional director's commentary for all cutscenes, and there are a shit ton of accessibility options, such as even being able to output character voices through the DualSense's vibrations. How cool is that? And speaking about DualSense, its implementation is one of the best, nuanced DualSense implementations that I've ever seen in any PS5 game. If, for example, you run past a generator to your left, the controller goes brrrr, but only on the left side. Okay, I'm out of time already and haven't even talked about the game itself. All in all, for me, experiencing my favorite game in such a high clarity again was worth every penny. But I am biased, and everyone should decide for themselves how much this remake is worth. But for me, it has deserved a high spot on this list, and if the original wouldn't exist yet, it would have very easily made number 1. Most of the times when there are many games in a franchise, that franchise might become more and more dull, no matter how successful it was initially. It is not often that a developer manages to create a product that not even refreshes the franchise, but also takes the best parts of their previous works and combines them into something unforgettable. This year, that happened with Elden Ring, From Software's arguably most anticipated title of all time. With this and number one, I have only used footage from very early in the game in order to avoid spoilers. Alright. Elden Ring is a collaboration that sounds like something out of a parallel universe. Miyazaki worked together with George R.R. Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, to build the worlds to this newest entry in the Souls franchise. And this is still very much a traditional Souls game in many ways. You'll have to build your own character and defeat various fantastic beasts that will usually kill you first, many times until you get to know their weaknesses and improve your own skills in addition to just leveling up in the game. Only this time it's an open world game. And yes, if you haven't played or seen a lot about Elden Ring, that might not sound like the best idea. Almost every game nowadays has an open world just for the sake of stretching out content, right? But in this case, it somehow just fits like a match made in heaven, like something that was always meant to be. Elden Ring still features a goosebump-inducing soundtrack, awesome level design, even better character and world design, and a perfect combat and RPG system. It even still features many linear dungeons and areas that are meticulously crafted, but there is also an open world now that is truly exciting to uncover. Elden Ring doesn't tell you to go to question marks on a map or even what to do in general. It only gives you slight hints, but what you do is up to you. As I'm writing all of this out, I get that some of it might sound rather esoteric, and even if I already said that a couple of times in this video, you'll simply have to try the game out for yourself. But all I can say is that this is definitely the best From Software Souls game that I have ever played, and even if I can't entirely wrap my head around why it works this well, it simply does. Elden Ring is one of the few Souls-like games that has caught me from the very beginning and isn't letting me go anytime soon. Okay guys, here we are again. Even if you don't know what I exactly played this year, you can probably predict my personal game of the year of 2022. Although all of the aforementioned games on this list were great, there is only one game that was so perfect and therefore stole my time as much as one specific title. And that game is... I'm sorry I didn't play Stray yet. It's God of War Ragnarok. The original God of War reboot, although not my favorite game of all time, was probably the best game that I have ever played. So naturally, the expectation towards its sequel were pretty high, to say the least. And I don't know who at Sony Santa Monica had to sell their soul to the devil, but through some form of dark magic, Ragnarok keeps the exact level of quality as the first game and even surpasses it in some aspects. I still don't know if I think that Ragnarok is actually better than 2018's God of War, but if it isn't, it definitely comes close. This game starts off exactly where its predecessor ended. Well, not exactly, because about 3 years have passed, but Freya is still understandably vengeful towards Kratos, and in addition, Atreus has been secretly trying to find clues about the whereabouts of the imprisoned giant Tyr, much to the dismay of Thor and his father Odin, which leads to an epic battle right at the start of the game. But as with many entries on this list, I honestly don't want to say too much about the story, and don't worry, the footage that I captured and you're seeing here again is from fairly early in the game. Despite relying on the same mix of combat, exploration and light puzzle solving as the first game, Ragnarok features much more open areas like the Lake of the Nine from its predecessor, but in my opinion the balance between linear levels and more open spots is paced perfectly. It always made me want to explore everything and travel back to previously inaccessible areas without getting the feeling that I'm burnt out on open world tasks. In my opinion, God of War Ragnarok features everything that a Game of the Year title needs, and therefore deserves a number one spot on my list. I can't really describe it any different than it just being a perfect experience through and through. Although it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but rather just builds on what already made the first game so good, it is absolutely polished in every way. The sound design, the level design, the combat, the dialogue, the epicness, the seriousness and the lightheartedness all harmonize in such a way that should not be taken for granted. But what do you think? Do you disagree with some entries on this list? Did I miss anything? Tell me in the comments below. I hope you have a wonderful new year. I love you all. See you next time.